without having been there and actually seen it for yourself in person, it's hard to comprehend just how hard Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, particularly in the lower Ninth Ward. When levees broke, this neighborhood bore the brunt of the damage, altering the landscape that defied logic. Roofs of houses lay in the middle of the streets, cars had been tossed around, littering yards, streets, and even front porches. Whole houses were lifted off their foundations, personal items, remnants of people's lives scattered everywhere. This is what Mark Mayhem experienced when he visited New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. 10 years ago, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans with a mass destruction, leaving a deep scar on an already impoverished population. Most of us were around 8 or 9 years old, and I, for one, remember it vividly. Today I will inform you of the poverty in New Orleans before Katrina, the struggle during Katrina, and how they are still in the recovery stage in the most impoverished parts of New Orleans. Poverty in New Orleans was a big problem before Katrina. The economic struggle in the households of New Orleans in 2004 is shown in the household income in Two-Blind Canal prior to Katrina, which was $6,875, which is less than half of the guideline amount, according to Dr. Simo of DePaul University in her academic journal reflecting the poverty in New Orleans. The storm hit the poorest parts of New Orleans. Circled in red is the lower Ninth Ward, and as you can see, the darker parts are the most poverty-stricken areas, and lower Ninth Ward is the one on this next one. You can see a flooding chart as well, and the lower Ninth Ward was one of the most flooded areas and is also one of the most impoverished areas as well. Hurricane Katrina came to the impoverished population of New Orleans, and they struggled to evacuate. Most people in New Orleans could drive themselves to safely, but there was some 112,000 people who didn't have access to cars, according to Brian Wilson in his evaluation of the evacuation of Hurricane Katrina. Some citizens who lived paycheck to paycheck simply couldn't afford to work, missed work on Monday. There's a lot of people in New Orleans that just couldn't afford to leave because they had to get to their jobs on Monday. And it was the end of the month, so they were running out of money already. There were a few city buses that took people to out of town shelters, but those were limited resources, and over 10,000 estimated people took shelter in the Superdome as well. The recovery of New Orleans in the low-income New Orleans has lasted the past 10 years. I am a disaster management major, and my professor went to New Orleans 3 years after the hurricane, and he was telling me about how he took a tour, and they wanted to go to the lower Ninth Ward to see how the hurricane affected it, but the tour guide didn't really want to take them there because he didn't want to show them the bad part of town. He wanted to take them to like the French Quarters and the touristy areas. But when he did take them to the lower Ninth Ward, he could see the cultural divide, the mostly black area, and remaining work that needed to be done. And with the water lines on the houses like 7 or 8 feet high, and still a lot of damage. Attitudes on the recovery of after 10 years vary between different social categories. And according to a survey done at the 10-year anniversary, 59% of white residents said that they feel like the city is mostly recovered, compared to 22% of African American residents. And that shows you how they have different opinions of how well the city has recovered from this catastrophe. And you see, this is pictures taken this past year of houses in the lower Ninth Ward. Some are still boarded up and abandoned and not even started to be built back. As you can see, the effects of Hurricane Katrina lasted the past 10 years, especially for the poor population that it hit so hard. Many suffered and lost much at the rage of Hurricane Katrina, but it's hard to even comprehend how much the struggles multiplied for those who were struggling so much before Katrina.